Tenemos hoy el gran honor de contar con la presencia de Marcus Sheff, CEO of Impact SC. I will switch to English. In a minute, I will read some things about his CV, his great CV. But before then, maybe we can do like a short round so you can introduce yourselves, please.
Iñaki Yacuría, journalist, chief editor in Catalunya del Mundo, and columnist.
Marc Mascurado. I work in Catalunya Radio as my friend. I used to work in a morning show team.
My name is Juan López. I am teacher in Universidad Oliva, and this morning I am here because el debate that my university is doing sends here to me for
We met yesterday indeed.
Ana Grau nos hemos al contributo a la media para la razón de My name is Ana Sule. I'm working at the National Palestina.
Es el sur de Catalunya Radio.
Indeed.
Cristina Mas, I work for Ahora newspaper.
Wonderful.
Good morning, I'm Gina Tosas. I'm working for La Vanguardia, a newspaper, and for the international desk.
Xavier Rius, YouTuber. From Rius TV. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, Marcus Sheff is CEO of the Institute for Monitoring Peace and Cultural Tolerance in School Education, Impact SC, a research and policy nonprofit that analyzes textbooks, employment standards on peace and tolerance as derived from UNESCO declarations and resolutions, and presents recommendations to governments, ministries of education, and policymakers. He was a political reporter at The Nation, an editor at the Jerusalem Post, and a foreign correspondent before heading the Workshop, a strategic communications firm, for a decade. He worked for Dow Jones International and Advancer Incorporated, and was CEO at Intermedia, an international business development firm, before becoming executive director at the Israeli project. He has for 2 decades been involved in global healthcare. He has briefed world leaders, spoken at the United Nations and parliaments, and appears regularly in the media and been published in multiple foreign policy outlets. He studied political science and international relations at Leeds University, where he was an elected leader of the Student Union, and international relations at Tel Aviv University. He was named a J100 most influential people in the Jewish world. We are honored to have you here with us, Marcus Sheff. I've been listening to Marcus Sheff these last days, and I can tell that every time I can learn more. You're inspiring, and we are very much honored to have you here.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Tal, and for the incredible work that you do, bringing together this group of serious and influential journalists. Thank you all for being here at what is, by some standards, still early in the morning. So very much appreciated. So absolutely, as Tal said, Impact SC, the Institute for Monitoring Peace and Cultural Tolerance in School Education, we were established about 25, 26 years ago in relation to the Oslo Accords, and an understanding that a precondition for peace is an understanding by young people that peace is possible. And more than that, the necessity for a complex understanding of how peace can be achieved in a very real, in a very practical way, rather than just a collection of cliches and sound bites, which is so much the case in relation to everything that goes on in the Middle East. And the nature of our research is entirely qualitative. That is to say that we look at whole state school curricula, page by page, book by book, to get a real understanding of what it is that the authorities are passing down to the next generation. The values, the identities that they wish to pass down. And in the Middle East, it is, I think, fair to say that curricula are very much outside of Israel. Curricula are very much state controlled. And this is, for good, and this is, of course, for bad, as everything in which the state is involved can be in any country in the world. But the uniquely authoritative nature of textbooks is absolutely understood by educationists, by sociologists. They stand alone among the noise of information, of communication that young people get in relation to the societies of the future that they are expected to be a part of, again, for good or for bad. And so they are very much worth studying. They are very much worth engaging with policymakers about. And it is clear that one knows what one wants to see, which is UNESCO-derived standards of peace and tolerance, respect for the other, for the individual other, peacemaking as the way to resolve conflict, no hate, no incitement, gender equality, sexual identity equality, economic prosperity, historical accuracy. These are the UNESCO and or United Nations derivations that we expect to see in school curricula. We do not compare one against the other, although people would very much like us to do that. But we look at each school curriculum across the MENA region and now beyond through that particular prism. And so, having looked at school curricula now for that amount of time, obviously, we have trend lines, which means to say, just like public opinion polling, a one poll, tells you what happened yesterday, but a set of polls gives you an idea of where political trends are going. So it is the same with school curricula, actually. One can see through looking at them and then going back, and in the Middle East, they are reviewed year after year. One can see that they are getting better, they are getting worse in relation to those standards. It's an objective measurement, or there has been no change in any particular time. And their ability to affect the actions of young people is quite immense and sometimes absolutely catastrophic. And that in relation to October the 7th. When we think of the October the 7th massacre, when we think of 3,000 Nukba terrorists and another 3,000 or so Gaza civilians who stormed an international border, who raped men, women, children, burned families alive, who murdered in hundreds and hundreds, who abducted babies and the elderly, and some of them still remain in the dungeons of Gaza. We do not know how many are alive, how many are dead, but we are reminded every single day that they remain in those dungeons as hostages, prisoners of this terrible genocidal terrorist organization, which is Hamas. We ask ourselves, all of us, all normal people ask, how could this happen? How do people get to the point where they allow themselves to commit those acts? And by the way, we also wonder and shake our heads in wonder and maybe horror, knowing how many employees of UNRWA, a United Nations organization, were actively involved in the massacre, were actively involved in the abduction of terrorists, and held Israeli hostages in their homes. A teacher of UNRWA holding an Israeli hostage in his home. And these are not bad apples. Everything that we know about UNRWA, we know through the education system. And looking at the education system, we know that this is a feature. It is not a bug. This is part of an institution that is essentially rotten, but supported by the international community. So if you look at textbooks and you see that Jews are personified as liars and fraudsters, cheats, that is to say, who must disappear. If you teach students an exercise about cutting the necks of the enemy, if you teach them that the massacre of Jews on a bus, civilians on a bus, is a hafla, which is Arabic for a barbecue party, that Dalal Mughrabi, a terrorist who was part of the killing of 38 people, including 13 children, and we understand personally threw a baby against a wall and killed that child. She is a role model to these children in these textbooks. She appears 8 times, 8 specific times, particularly for young girls as a role model, to tell them that if they want equality with men, the way that they're boys, the way that they do that is through their martyrdom. UNRWA educates young people that dying is better than living. A death through martyrdom is better than a long life which does not include these acts of violence, essentially. And that becoming a martyr will be rewarded in heaven. And we know the rewards that are offered to them. You know, for 14, 15-year-old young men, these rewards could sound very interesting indeed. And it starts right from the first grade. First graders are taught the Arabic letter ha through the word for attack and the word for martyr. It is systematic from first grade to 12th grade across all subjects, and not just the humanities. It runs into the sciences too. So mathematics, addition, basic arithmetic is taught through adding martyrs, martyrs being terrorists. How many martyrs were there in the first intifada? How many in the second? How many do you have? Not apples and pears, which I think is what Spanish parents would expect that their 4th grade children would be taught. So these are just a handful of examples. There are 800, 900, 1,000 elements of this curriculum, a jihadi curriculum, a curriculum which is based on the idea of martyrdom and which the encouragement of young people to sacrifice themselves. This curriculum is created by the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah. It is taught in Palestinian Authority schools in the West Bank, by UNRWA schools in the West Bank, by UNRWA schools in Gaza, and Hamas schools in Gaza. Those were the schools which the Palestinian Authority themselves used to run until Hamas violently took over Gaza in 2007 after Israel withdrew in August of 2005 with the hopes for peace and reconciliation and a proto-Palestinian state in Gaza with which Israel could live peacefully. That, of course, did not happen. There was nothing peaceful about Gaza from the moment the Palestinian Authority took it over. It got worse when Hamas took it over. And then the rocket attacks grew and grew and grew until the conflicts continued. So the withdrawal by Israel from Gaza was just another, if you like, step in the road of what seems like an absolute obsession with the destruction of Israel, of Israeli civil life, of the possibility of living side by side with Israel, coming out of Gaza. And so we also see that this same educational material is created by UNRWA staff themselves. So you have the Palestinian Authority curriculum, which is taught in UNRWA schools. And we can get into why, because they do not have to, but they do. They also create their own materials, and their materials are supplementary materials, which are to support the teaching of this curriculum, and they are just as bad. So that example I gave you of the burning of Jews on a bus as a barbecue party, that came from an UNRWA teacher. who created this material for his school pupils. That actually is not part of the PA curriculum, it is to support the PA curriculum. We know that 100 Hamas members who carried out terror attacks were educated in the UNRWA system. We know this because it was on the Hamas website. They were very proud of it. They said, these are our martyrs. And they went to X school or Y school, UNRWA schools in Gaza. So this connective tissue between UNRWA and between Hamas and Islamic Jihad as well, I don't think there is any doubt in anyone's mind about this anymore. In fact, former UNRWA employees have stated, some on the record and some off the record, that they wouldn't even be able to possibly operate inside of Gaza without this work that they do with Hamas, which is absolutely bizarre. A UN agency essentially saying, we are quite happy to work with a genocidal terrorist organization. It doesn't bother us at all, and we've never even tried to find an alternative to this, because why should we? So the extremism is endemic to the organization. It is part of the organization. I could give you many examples. Former school principal, UNRWA school principal, Suhail al-Hindi, was a member of Hamas's Politburo, not even just a member of Hamas, an actual Hamas, leader, ruler, if you like. Convicted terrorist Saeed Siam, 23 years an UNRWA teacher. So again, this is just to illustrate the connective tissue. So Impact SC spent years warning that if this curriculum continues to be taught, something absolutely appalling and terrible can happen. Not even in our wildest imagination did we envisage October the 7th. I don't think anybody, could. But it was clear to us, if you continue to indoctrinate and incite young people to commit acts of terror, to envisage themselves as people who should sacrifice themselves for a greater good. That is to say, the value of their life, the sum value of everything that they are, is about their sacrifice, i.e., attacking and killing as many Jews as they possibly can. That is the zeitgeist. That is the very basis of the school curriculum. Again, not a bug, a feature. Strategic, absolutely strategic. And it is utterly incomprehensible that there are countries who still feel that it is perfectly legitimate to keep on writing checks to UNRWA without a change to that school curriculum. It is as simple as that. Incomprehensible. The United States will not. The United States Congress made a very clear decision, actually twice, that they will freeze all funding to UNRWA. They, frankly, have had enough. They are saying to the leadership, to their taxpayers, we're not going to use your good money to incite people in the Middle East to kill other people in the Middle East. We will not allow Palestinian children to be incited to kill Jews on your dime. I think that's perfectly reasonable. The European Parliament has condemned the Palestinian Authority school curriculum and UNRWA for teaching the school curriculum year on year, including last May 2024. A European Parliament and a European Commission and a European Union, of which Spain participates. The European Commission itself, DG NEAR, has stated categorically in a signed document that there will be conditionality between the funding to the Palestinian Authority until the school curriculum is reformed. So there is no question among responsible, decent leaders that the curriculum being taught, the textbooks being taught, the educational infrastructure in the West Bank and Gaza is absolutely at the core of violent acts. And that the idea that it can be, that it should be supported by decent people is an anathema to them. But I do want to give you another view, and that is what can be done. So when you look around the MENA region, we are seeing positive change, real change in educational materials, in textbooks. And it is absolutely heartwarming to see it, but it goes further than that. It gives one faith in the future of the MENA region, in the future of the Middle East and North Africa. The UAE, United Arab Emirates, have produced a curriculum that is centered around peace, around tolerance, around the acceptance of the other types of Muslims, non-Muslims, people from different countries. Saudi Arabia removed pretty much all the anti-Semitism from its school curriculum, the violent jihad and the homophobia, and it is a work in process which is improving and improving. Israeli textbooks have for years featured peacemaking at the very center of its school curriculum and is very clear in its discussion of the Palestinian narrative. That is to say, the Israeli curriculum says this is, if you like, the mainstream Israeli view, and there is a Palestinian view of what happened in 1948. They call it the Nakba, and this is what they say happened. Discuss. Think about this. Engage in discussion and debate, critical thinking. That is very much a feature of the Israeli national state school curriculum. Again, it's more like the French version where you have different publishers, different textbooks. So not one book, one grade, one subject like the rest of the Middle East. And yet this is the centrality of that school curriculum. The Moroccan curricular reform embraces the Amazigh community, used to be known as the Berbers, uplifts women and girls, embraces the remaining Jewish community in Morocco, and speaks quite clearly and distinctly about Jewish contribution to Morocco and the great Jewish community that once existed in that country. They've all chosen to talk about peace and tolerance. The Palestinian Authority and UNRWA have chosen to talk about resistance, violence, conflict, death, martyrdom, and jihad. So that's a path that we can no longer walk down, because October the 7th can quite easily happen again. This is a curriculum which is taught, for instance, in the West Bank today. Anybody who has been to the area and seen the geography and seen the distance between the Palestinian Authority and major cities in Israel will understand how important it is that there is a peace education on both sides of that green line. And that does not exist on the eastern side of that green line. It does not exist in Tulkarem, 16 kilometers from Netanya, a major city in Israel, just as one example. And so leadership is talking about the day after. Everyone is talking about the day after. And I will end with this. If you want to prevent another massacre the day after, if we want to dream of peace, if we want a different outcome, if we want to stop this conflict which is presented as intractable. I don't believe any conflict is intractable. If we want an end to this, we have to start by de-radicalizing the children of Gaza, and that can be done and should be done and has to be done through an alternative school curriculum. UNRWA is not the solution to this. UNRWA cannot, it will not. It had opportunities year on year. Year on year, it was asked, it was begged to change the school curriculum. The Palestinian Authority was begged to change the school curriculum. This did not happen. It's the simplest thing in the world. This is not nuclear physics. We're not talking about splitting the atom here. We're talking about textbooks, taking out bad material, putting in good material. I think we know how to do this. There are millions of educationalists all over the world who do this every day. There are billions of children all over the world every day who are in school studying. It is one of the most common things that we have in our world today, school education. So let us not make it the most complicated thing in the world. Let us make those changes. There is an alternative curriculum which is actually being written by a Palestinian professor. It could be easily instituted in Gaza. It's about will. And what is that will? That will is an end to this national Palestinian narrative of resistance, attack, violence, resistance, victimhood, attack, violence, and it goes on and on. That has to stop, and the way to stop is through education.